Okay, welcome back to Into the Cauldron. So today, what we're going to do is we're going to basically the objective today is to understand the difference between the unemployment rate and the labor force participation rate. They are two of the key indices that measure health in the economy. Okay, so first, well, we've got three things we need to go over. They are the three components that compose the unemployment rate and the labor force participation rate. Okay, so the first is the term employed. Okay, so what that means is we're referring to people 16 years of age or older with a job. And so basically what this means is, so, with a job basically could mean any of the following things. Someone who worked 1 hour or more, I believe within the past week. Also, when you're counted, even if you have two jobs, you're just counted once. You're employed. You're either employed or not employed. The number of occupations you hold does not matter. Okay? I should have said key points. Key points is what we're focusing on here in relation to what it means to be employed. Okay, so one of the things that I noticed is in reference to, quote, being employed, one of the difficulties is, assessing the qualitative nature of the jobs that are being held. For example, prior to the recession in 2008, someone might have been paid $50,000 a year at a single job working something like 40 hours a week. However, after the recession or currently, maybe this same person is working two jobs, perhaps 20 hours a week at each and only making $30,000. But as far as the employed statistics concerned, all that matters is that they worked. Worked, didn't work. Another example of the kind of qualitative disparity that exists within these statistics, or basically what they're unable to really assess, is an example like, a CEO, they're listed as employed. They're paid, for example, $1 million per year versus a high schooler that scoops ice cream for 10 hours a week that gets $70 a week. They're both counted the same. So just some things to consider as we move forward. Okay, now the unemployed refers to, or being unemployed, refers to not working but actively looking. Okay, and so there's a key difference between these two terms here. When we say what actively looking means as far as the Bureau of Labor Statistics is concerned, is that within the past 4 weeks, you have been looking for a job. So this takes us to the last term we need, and that is not in the labor force. So that means you have no job and are not looking. However, first I should say, this statistic typically includes like stay-at-home parents, retirees, students, and then very important here, this also includes people that would like to work, but if not, perhaps there's a term called discouraged workers. You've got people who want to work, but they have not looked within the past 4 weeks because, perhaps they just think to themselves after looking for 6 months or so that there's nothing out there for them. So they stop looking, okay? So remember that difference between employed, meaning you have to have been actively looking within the past 4 weeks, versus not being counted in the labor force because you have not been looking for a job in the last 4 weeks, despite the fact that you would like to work. We've defined what employed, unemployed, and not in the labor force means. So next, what we need to do is we need to define what the term unemployment means in relation to how the Bureau of Labor Statistics defines it, and what the labor force participation rate is in relation to how it's defined by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, okay? So, one thing to note is that the combination of employed and unemployed people constitutes what's called the labor force. And so what we are going to do here is just go over the definitions of unemployment and labor force participation rate. And then what we're going to do is I'm going to show how one could manipulate the statistics in order to create a desired outcome in relation to perhaps having a lowering of the unemployment rate, which is a good thing. It looks very favorably. It makes the economy look. Can't speak tonight. It makes the economy look good, healthy. Versus, while at the same time the labor force participation rate might also be going down. And so first, when we calculate the unemployment rate, what we do is we take the number of unemployed people and we divide it by the employed people plus the unemployed people. So basically you've got kind of your total here, your employed and your unemployed, and that makes up, that's kind of that goes in the denominator, and in the numerator you have the unemployed. For the labor force participation rate, we take the employed and the unemployed, also known as the labor force, and we divide that by the combination of, or the total of, the employed plus the unemployed, and plus those not in the labor force. Now, I personally think this is a better indicator of a healthy economy, because when you're talking about the labor force participation rate, you're including everybody that's not in the labor force. Well, these people still have to eat, and we live in a system that's predicated on taxation. And you have people that go to schools, you have people that use the roads, you have people that, use all sorts of government services of all kinds. And so somebody has to produce the resources to for everyone to utilize those. So obviously you want this ratio, you want the ratio of, productive people to, in this case, non-productive, producers to non-producers, to be, in favor of the producers. You want more producers within that ratio. I'm going to show how the unemployment rate and the labor force participation rate are calculated. So I'll do that in this example. In this example here, I'm going to show how you can, or one could potentially manipulate the numbers to depict a favorable sort of outcome. Okay, so in my example here, what I did was we have a kind of a total pool of, so between the labor force and the people not in the labor force, there are 50 total people. 30 of those people are employed, 10 of those people are unemployed, and 10 are, by the Bureau of Labor Statistics definition, not in the labor force. Okay? So, down here when we compute, in order to arrive at the unemployment rate, you basically take the number of unemployed, which is 10, and you divide that by the labor force, which is the employed plus the unemployed. So 30 plus 10, you get a 25% unemployment rate in our example. Now down here, labor force participation rate, it's just a little more involved. So you take the employed, you add the unemployed, that's going to go in the numerator. Okay, and in the denominator, we have all three. We have the employed, unemployed, and the people who are not in the labor force. Okay, so we arrive at a labor force participation rate of 80%. Okay, now let's say it's 2008, and I've actually got the numbers here. So it's 2008. In 2008, the unemployment rate was 6.5%, and it actually went down further to, or it should increase to 10% at its peak, but just for sake of comparison, we'll keep it kind of consistent here. So it was at 6.5% as the crisis got going and deepened. Now, right now, the most recent numbers have it at 3.7%, which I can't remember, I read something, but they said it's, they being one of the, I don't know, maybe it's CNBC or something, said it's the lowest unemployment rate in like 50 years or something. Impressive, right? Okay, now the labor force participation rate in October of 2008 was at 66%, okay? The most current data has the labor force participation rate at 62.9%. So that's strange, right? The unemployment rate has gone down. That's good. That's what you want, right? That should mean more people are working. However, the labor force participation rate has also gone down. Now that's strange because that would mean that less people are working than before. So what I'm going to do here is we walk through our first example here, which showed us how to calculate the unemployment rate and the labor force participation rate. And the second example, we are going to create kind of a hypothetical scenario that I think could have been part of the reason why the real numbers we get here are the way they are. And so basically what you could do, if you remember a little bit earlier, we talked about that kind of key definition, which was the way they defined, unemployed. So you're unemployed if you've been looking for work within the past 4 weeks, but you're not employed, you're not counted in the labor force if you have not been looking for work within the last 4 weeks, but want to. So perhaps from 2008 forward, what happened was a significant amount of people just kind of gave up. They couldn't get the jobs back that they previously had at the pay rates that they had, or they just said, I can't break into, college grads, I can't break into the labor market, I'm going to go move back in with the parents or whatever, and I'll get to that in a second. But anyway, what you could do to make the numbers look better, the unemployment rate is always the one that gets flashed. That's the one that everybody kind of sees that pays attention to this statistic. They don't talk as much about the labor force participation rate. And that makes sense because currently the unemployment rate paints a very rosy picture, while the labor force participation rate does quite the opposite. So let's say you want to paint a rosy picture. Well, what you can do is, let's say you notice that, hey, there are a significant amount of people, let's say it's 2008, that want to work. However, they become, discouraged. Oh, I'm not going to be able to get anything. And so they've just kind of stopped putting in applications for a month or two. And perhaps you notice there's a significant amount of people that did that, or perhaps there just is a significant amount of people that did that. So what you could do, we have the same number. We've got 50 total people we're working with. Well, if in this scenario, I just said, okay, well, if, half of our unemployed people fell outside of that, having looked for work within the last 4 weeks, meaning for more than 4 weeks, they have not been looking for work, all of a sudden they get shifted into this not in the labor force statistic. So if we plug these numbers in, here's what happens. On the top here, unemployment rate, well, it goes down significantly, all the way down to 14.29%. But look at this. Our labor force participation rate went from 80 to 70%. It went down. it got worse. Now let's remember, labor force participation, at the end of the day, you know, you want that ratio of, you know, people working, or you want your labor force to non-labor force rate to be in favor of the producers. You want people producing. We need more producers, not less. And so even though you have a situation here where the unemployment rate's gone down, it's, you know, it's just a manipulation of the statistic. The situation itself is really quite bad. But because of this, and I mean, you could, in theory, you could just knock all these out, take the 5 out and have, you know, there's 20 people that are not counted in the unemployment statistic, and you could have, you know, 0%. And so what I wanted to, in summation, I wanted to kind of say that unemployment statistics, first and foremost, they don't tell us anything about the quality of payment in terms of like hours or pay. By shifting some unemployed persons from being counted to not being counted, we can paint a rosier picture, as we saw in our example. The current data suggests that a good number of people went from being unemployed to, unemployed and counted, to being unemployed and not counted in reference to the unemployment rate. Obviously, the labor force participation rate picks that up, which is why I prefer this, the labor force participation rate. So at the end of the day, we have fewer producers supporting more consumers. You know, that's not good, which therefore puts more stress on a finite pool of resources. And so some of the examples that I've seen are, for example, the amount of people on food stamps. It's still more or less double what it was 10 years ago, and they have not been able to get that number back down to even where it was in 2008, or anywhere even close to that. Secondly, 35% of 25 to 29-year-olds are living with their parents. In other words, that the amount of resources has to support, you know, more people. And I believe that number, 35% of 25 to 29-year-olds living at home, is I think I read it's the highest it's been since 1943. And we all know what was happening in 1943, right? It was still technically the Great Depression and World War II. So there's all sorts of catastrophes going on in the world. And, you know, we're in a situation today where the same number of young adults are living with their parents as during those times. Lastly, I just wanted to say that I'm going to provide links below to the Bureau of Labor Statistics I used. There was a Pew Research group of statistics I used, and there'll be a couple of other sources linked below. So thank you for watching, and sorry I'm kind of stuttering through these. I am new to this, so feedback is always welcome. But again, thanks for sitting through it, and until next time.